I never thought the deepest betrayal of my life would come from the child I raised with my own hands. I had traveled across the world to visit him in Dubai, believing I was still welcome in his life. But his wife had other plans. Lies were whispered, poison disguised as concern, until one cruel decision was made. My return ticket was canceled, and I was abandoned at the airport with no phone, no money, and nowhere to go. As I sat there in shock, fighting back tears, a well-dressed man stopped in front of me. He leaned in and quietly said, "Pretend you're my wife. My driver is almost here, and your son will regret this." I didn't know his name. I didn't know his intentions, but I knew one thing: fate had just walked up to me in a tailored suit, and my life would never be the same again. My name is Helena Moore, and I am 64 years old, and I never imagined that the loneliest moment of my life would happen under the bright lights of Dubai International Airport. I had packed my bags with love, believing my visit had strengthened my bond with my son. But instead of a warm farewell, I was met with chaos: my ticket rejected at the counter, my calls unanswered, and my son nowhere in sight. When the agent told me the ticket had been canceled by the purchaser, my heart sank. I reached into my purse for my phone, only to discover it missing. No contact, no help, no explanation. Just a suitcase, an airport bench, and a silence that screamed betrayal louder than any words ever could. It didn't take long for the truth to begin whispering through memory. Conversations that once seemed harmless now sounded sharp and pointed. His wife had always smiled too sweetly while choosing her words too carefully, always highlighting my mistakes, always reminding him how uncomfortable she felt around me. She twisted kindness into manipulation so gently that even he began to believe I was a burden instead of a mother. And while I trusted love to speak louder than lies, she had already finished rewriting my place in his heart. Tonight was simply the final sentence. The cruelest part wasn't just that the ticket was canceled, it was that it had been done quietly, deliberately, without a single message sent my way. The airline staff spoke gently, offering sympathy they didn't owe me, while I stood frozen in disbelief. Somewhere far away, the person I once rocked to sleep had clicked a button and erased my safety. I wondered how many small betrayals had led to this moment, how many times I excused distance as busyness, coldness as stress, silence as forgetfulness. But this wasn't forgetfulness. This was abandonment planned. She reached again for her purse, searching desperately for a phone she was certain had been there earlier. Nothing. Gone, maybe taken, maybe misplaced. Either way, the result was the same: no way to call home, no way to contact help, no way to reach the child she once believed would protect her as she aged. Around her, people hurried toward flights, families embraced, loved ones reunited. Meanwhile, she sat alone, invisible in the middle of a crowded terminal, proof that loneliness doesn't require silence. It only requires betrayal. At first, panic took her breath. Then shame followed, the kind that wraps itself around your heart and whispers that you somehow deserved this. She worried about seeming dramatic. She worried about becoming a burden to strangers. She worried about everything except the one person who should have been worrying for her. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Dignity was the only possession she had left, and she clung to it with shaking hands. Hours passed like slow-moving shadows. She sat on a metal bench, suitcase at her feet, watching boarding gates open for everyone except her. Security guards changed shifts. Lights dimmed and brightened. Announcements echoed overhead like distant voices calling someone else's name. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and whispered prayers into the silence, not for revenge, not even for justice, just for the strength to survive the night without breaking completely. Just when resignation began to replace hope, a shadow paused in front of her. A tall, well-dressed man studied her quietly, not with pity, but with concern sharpened by curiosity. He lowered his voice and spoke as if the moment required secrecy. His words were unexpected, bold, and almost unbelievable, an invitation wrapped inside a warning. One sentence: pretend to be my wife, and suddenly the path in front of her split in two: trust a stranger or remain abandoned. And in that instant, fate stopped feeling theoretical. It pulled up a chair beside her. He didn't waste words. He simply leaned closer and said, almost in a whisper, that she should pretend to be his wife. At first, she thought she had misheard him. Her heart pounded, half in fear, half in disbelief. Why would a wealthy, confident man risk something so strange for a stranger like her? He spoke calmly, explaining that his driver was already on the way, and that she looked too vulnerable to be left alone in a city where help is often transactional. His confidence felt protective rather than threatening. Still, she hesitated, because trust is fragile when your own child has already broken it. But the kindness in his eyes held something steady, something safe, something real. Moments later, a black luxury car pulled up outside the terminal, polished so perfectly the airport lights danced on its surface. The driver stepped out with quiet professionalism, greeting them both respectfully. The man beside her adjusted his cufflinks and said softly, "Let me help you. You don't deserve to be here alone." She didn't know whether to cry or run, but as the cold reality of the airport wrapped around her fragile heart again, the warmth of the invitation began to feel less like a risk and more like rescue. For the first time that night, she felt seen. Her instincts battled each other, fear warning her to stay where she was, dignity screaming that she didn't deserve abandonment. But desperation changes the way courage looks. Sometimes it isn't roaring. Sometimes it's a shaky nod and a quiet prayer. She agreed not because she fully trusted him, but because staying meant remaining invisible, discarded, forgotten. As they walked toward the car together, her steps were cautious yet hopeful. This wasn't an adventure. This was survival. And survival sometimes comes disguised as a stranger in a tailored suit. The car door closed with a soft thud, sealing the outside world away. The city lights blurred past as the car moved smoothly through Dubai's midnight streets. She watched silently, still unsure how a single conversation had shifted her fate so dramatically. Yet there was something deeply reassuring about the silence between them, not awkward, not threatening, just peaceful. For the first time since learning she'd been abandoned, her body relaxed slightly against the leather seat. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew where she was no longer staying, alone, grieving, forgotten at an airport bench. Eventually, he broke the silence, not with flattery, but with information. He calmly revealed that he knew of her son's wife's family. He had crossed paths with them in business circles, and without saying much, hinted that he was already aware of their fondness for manipulation and social control. His tone wasn't bitter, just factual. It was as if puzzle pieces she never knew existed suddenly clicked into place. Her abandonment was not an isolated moment of anger. It was a coordinated removal, and he had stepped into the story at the exact moment she needed an ally. He offered her temporary shelter, not charity, not ownership, just safety, a private guest room, meals, a chance to figure out her next steps without fear pressing on her chest. He assured her repeatedly that she owed him nothing. His only request was that she allow herself to rest. She wanted to refuse, pride has a way of resisting help, but the exhaustion inside her bones had already answered for her. For the first time since the airport, the weight on her heart loosened. Safety didn't feel like luxury. It felt like oxygen. When they finally arrived at his quiet, beautifully kept home, dignity gave way to emotion. As soon as the door closed behind her, the tears she had been holding back came pouring out, years of unspoken hurt, months of being brushed aside, and the final blow of abandonment. She told him everything, the lies, the distance, the canceled ticket, the missing phone, the way love had turned conditional. He didn't interrupt. He simply listened, offering tissues and silence, the kind of silence that heals instead of wounds. And for the first time in years, she felt believed. He didn't rush into anger or confrontation. Instead, he used the one advantage only powerful people usually possess: access. Quietly, calmly, he began asking questions in the right places: travel agencies, business contacts, social circles where whispers travel faster than news. He traced digital footprints, payment histories, and communication records. She watched in silence, torn between gratitude and disbelief that someone would care enough to investigate on her behalf. Where she had once been dismissed as dramatic, he treated every word she spoke as truth worth proving. And slowly, evidence began to align with her pain. This hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been deliberate. Soon, patterns emerged, all of them pointing back to one source, the daughter-in-law. Lies whispered gently into her son's ear. Subtle isolation. Carefully timed arguments. Manipulated misunderstandings. She painted the mother as difficult, ungrateful, even dangerous, until the son believed distance was protection instead of abandonment. Each carefully placed lie tightened the rope, and the final knot had been tied at the airport. Realizing this didn't erase the heartbreak, but it finally explained the cruelty. She wasn't unwanted because she failed. She was unwanted because someone else needed her gone. As more documents surfaced, a darker layer appeared: control over finances, travel bookings, allowances, and access. Tickets canceled, cards restricted, purchases monitored. It was all disguised as organization, yet it served one purpose: to ensure no decision could be made without permission. Even her ticket cancellation traced back to the same controlling hands. Seeing the truth laid out in numbers hurt in a way words never could. Her life had been rearranged like furniture in a house she no longer recognized, and she had been expected to smile through it. Painfully, the investigation revealed something even harder. Her son had allowed this to happen, not blindly, not accidentally, but willingly, believing siding with his wife meant maturity and loyalty. Over time, he had reshaped himself to match someone else's script, even if it meant erasing the woman who raised him. His silence had been a choice. His distance had been a decision. And while manipulation played its part, he had still chosen comfort over conscience. That truth didn't make her hate him. It simply broke her heart in a cleaner, sharper way. Seeing how exposed and vulnerable she had been, the millionaire moved from curiosity to conviction. He arranged legal protection, documentation, identity safeguards, emergency funds, ensuring no one could trap her again. He explained each step patiently, treating her not as a burden but as a human being who deserved stability. For the first time since arriving, she felt anchored, protected, not owned but defended. And that difference mattered more than anything. He didn't threaten. He didn't gossip. He simply presented the truth where it mattered among the business contacts and social investors who had once admired the daughter-in-law's family. Emails were reviewed, meetings revisited, deals reconsidered. One by one, the shiny facade around them began to dull. Reputation is fragile, and truth, once introduced, spreads quietly through every locked room. They had built an influence on charm. Now charm had company, and its name was Consequence. Back in her son's home, small cracks began to form. Phone calls became tense. Invitations fewer. Silence is heavier. The world they had built on manipulation was starting to shake, not because she shouted, but because truth had finally been given a voice. She didn't celebrate, she didn't gloat. She simply watched the tide begin to turn, unsure whether it would bring her son back to shore or reveal just how far he had drifted away. He arranged the meeting with quiet efficiency, no drama, no raised voices, just an invitation that sounded impossible to refuse. Her son arrived first, uneasy and confused, followed by his wife, who wore confidence like perfume. Other family members gathered slowly, unsure why they'd been called but sensing something significant in the air. She sat silently in the corner, hands folded, heart steady but fragile. When the millionaire finally entered, the room shifted. His presence commanded respect, not because of wealth but because of certainty. He explained calmly that the purpose of this meeting was truth, nothing more, nothing less. The atmosphere thickened with tension as everyone braced for what was coming, unaware that the comfortable illusion they had been living in was about to disappear forever. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't shout or posture. He simply placed neatly organized folders on the table, each one carrying proof, ticket cancellations traced to specific devices, financial manipulation, messages dripping with calculated lies. He explained everything step by step, like a surgeon exposing a hidden wound. Screenshots, records, confirmations, every page carried a weight that couldn't be dismissed with charm or denial. Her son's face was drained of color. His wife shifted nervously, eyes darting, searching for exits, verbal or otherwise. The truth no longer lived in rumor or emotion. It had documentation, signatures, timestamps, and the silence in the room became deafening. At first, the daughter-in-law tried to maintain her composure, offering practiced smiles and soft explanations. But truth is a mirror that never bends, and soon, her narrative began to crumble. Questions she once brushed aside now demanded answers. Excuses contradicted each other. Confidence slipped into panic. The woman who had once controlled every room suddenly found herself cornered by her own words. The facade of concern and innocence shattered, revealing the cold manipulation beneath. There were no villains created that day, only villains revealed. And for the first time, everyone finally saw how deep the deception had gone. Her son looked from document to document, struggling to reconcile the written proof with the story he had chosen to believe. Shame crept across his face as realization set in, not only about the lies told to him, but about the choices he had made because of them. He wasn't just a victim. He had been a participant in his mother's pain. That truth struck harder than any accusation ever could. His voice cracked when he finally spoke, asking questions he should have asked long ago. Regret is a sharp blade, and that day it cut deeply. Desperation breeds excuses, and she tried them all. Stress, misunderstanding, miscommunication. She even attempted to turn the conversation back toward the mother, painting herself as misunderstood and overburdened. But the room no longer belonged to her narrative. Evidence stood stronger than performance. Every attempt to redirect blame only tightened the rope of accountability around her. Slowly, she realized there was nowhere left to hide, no sympathetic ears, no manipulated allies. Truth had claimed the room, and it wasn't surrendering its place. Through it all, the millionaire remained composed, never cruel, never mocking. He simply connected the final dots aloud, explaining how easily love can be twisted when pride and insecurity take control. His voice carried authority wrapped in compassion, as though he wasn't exposing a villain but freeing a family from a lie. He didn't need anger to make his point. Truth doesn't require volume, only clarity. And clarity filled every corner of that room like light breaking through stained glass. Then at last she spoke. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, just honesty, raw and fragile. She talked about the airport, the canceled ticket, the missing phone, the loneliness that wrapped around her like a cold wind. She spoke about love, not accusation, how she had never wanted to compete with anyone, only to be included in her son's life. Her voice trembled, but her dignity didn't. And as she finished, the room didn't just hear her. It felt to her. For the first time, her truth stood without interruption, and the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful. If you're still here with me, make sure to hit like and subscribe. The truth that follows will stay with you long after the story ends. Truth does not destroy, it simply removes the mask. And when the mask finally fell, consequences didn't arrive with noise. They arrived with paperwork, legal language, withdrawn deals, and reputations quietly dissolving. The manipulation, the financial control, the ticket cancellation, all of it was documented and addressed. Protection orders were filed. Access to her finances was secured. Attempts to isolate her were formally condemned. Even his wife's family felt the ripple as business allies stepped back, unwilling to attach themselves to deceit. No one yelled, no one slammed doors, but lives still changed, not because she sought revenge, but because the truth had finally been allowed to stand without interruption. And truth always collects its debt. Her son had spent years believing he was justified, that loyalty to his wife meant blindness toward everyone else. But now, stripped of excuses, he faced the reflection he had avoided. He saw how easily he had traded compassion for convenience, how quickly he had abandoned the woman who once carried him through storms without complaint. Shame didn't roar, it settled slowly across his chest like heavy rain. He tried to apologize, but apologies don't erase airports or tears cried alone on metal benches. Healing would take time and participation. For the first time, he realized love isn't measured by words, it's measured by who you refuse to abandon when it's inconvenient. The daughter-in-law's power didn't vanish in a single moment, it faded gradually, like perfume losing its strength. Without allies, her charm no longer worked. Without control, her confidence felt hollow. And when people finally saw the manipulation beneath the softness, the admiration she once demanded evaporated completely. She wasn't hated. She was simply revealed, and revelation removes power more effectively than anger ever could. There were consequences at home, consequences socially, consequences legally. And though she blamed everyone but herself, the truth remained, control only works when others allow it. Now, no one did. For years, she had lived quietly, shrinking herself to keep the peace. But peace without respect is just silence wearing a mask. So she chose independence, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. Her finances were placed in her own hands. Her communication boundaries were firm. Access to her life became a privilege, not a right. She could still love her son, love never needed to disappear, but now it lived beside dignity rather than beneath it. And that shift changed everything. She was no longer someone waiting to be chosen. She chose herself. The millionaire never once tried to control her story. He didn't play the hero. He didn't expect gratitude as payment. He simply ensured she had security, a safe place to live temporarily, legal guidance, personal independence. His support was respectful, steady, and quiet. He admired her strength, the way she endured heartbreak without letting hatred shape her. And though there was kindness between them, a warmth built on shared respect, it wasn't dependency. It was companionship. Two adults recognizing dignity in each other. In a world that had tried to shrink her, he simply refused to let her disappear. Slowly, her life began to feel like hers again. She woke each morning with purpose instead of fear. She laughed genuinely without checking who was watching. She reconnected with friends, cooked meals she enjoyed, I walked through markets freely. Her independence wasn't loud, it was peaceful, strong, earned. And with every day that passed, the memory of that airport bench hurt a little less. Not because she forgot, but because she had rebuilt herself around the lesson, not the wound. In the quiet of one evening, she reflected on everything that had happened. Betrayal had cut deeply, but it had also revealed the truth about love. Real love does not isolate, it does not control, it does not abandon you in foreign airports and call it loyalty. Real love stands beside you even when the world grows inconvenient. She didn't hate her son, she simply refused to shrink for him anymore. And with that decision, she finally found peace. Because sometimes life breaks your heart, only to hand it back stronger, wrapped in dignity, self-respect, and the unwavering knowledge that you deserved better all along.